media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Liberty McArtor.
Thanks for joining us on the weekend edition of Point of View. It's always a privilege to be here. I'm sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, and so happy to be joined by both Kelly Shackelford and Jeff Mateer. Kelly, as you know, is the president and chief counsel of First Liberty Institute and a commissioner on the Trump administration's Commission on Religious Liberty. So, Kelly, happy to have you back in studio.
It's good to be with you, Liberty.
And Jeff is the executive vice president and chief legal officer at First Liberty. Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Sure, Liberty.
We have a lot to discuss today, so definitely want to get into a lot of religious liberty issues. It's been a busy week for First Liberty. As I was looking at your website, I don't think there's ever not a busy week for y'all, though. So let's talk about something that I know listeners are going to want to hear about. You potentially have another case going before the Supreme Court having to do with Cambridge Christian schools in Florida, whether or not Christian schools can pray before their football games. I actually remember this case. So it's been going on for a while, because when I worked for y'all 10 years ago, I remembered that I was writing about this. And so it may finally go before the Supreme Court. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's when you say the case, they're like, huh? Two Christian schools in the state championship football game, and they're told they can't have a prayer. Why? Well, you're over the loudspeakers, and it's like the Florida High School Athletic Association controls the loudspeakers, and that somehow makes it. I mean, you're like, well, so I can't say something about my faith on a public street or a public park, it's just bizarre, right? And of course, this was all from this old concept that people had from some bad case law that, well, if you ever have religion anywhere around school, then you got to shut it down, which is not the law. And of course, in the Coach Kennedy case, we obliterated that whole idea because it's wrong. It's not constitutional. So what do they go to? They said, well, okay, our argument is that it's government speech. Okay, two private Christian schools having a prayer is government speech. And so the danger of this is, if the government can make your speech their speech, then you have no, what they say is, since it's government speech, there's no free speech violation because it's their speech. It's not your speech. This is really dangerous because it can be applied in a lot of different contexts. And so I don't know how much, Point of View listeners are more informed than many on this, but there's like 7,000 to 8,000 requests a year for the Supreme Court to take your case. They took 56 last year. So they don't take many.
Right.
So when you ask them to take your case, like we did in Cambridge, people aren't going to spend $25,000, $50,000 to do a brief to say, hey, I want to file a supportive brief. You should really take this case, this Cambridge Christian case. So I think 2 years ago when they took our Kennedy case and when they took our Carson case in the same year, which is unbelievable, I think we had like maybe 11 amici briefs filed. On Cambridge, we had 21.
Wow.
I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that because the impact is so great. So we're hopeful, and some really key briefs of those amici briefs, those outside. Paul Clement, the number one guy at the Supreme Court, some over 100 organizations jumped on to file briefs because it would affect all of their freedoms. So that is a case to be watching because I think that is one of the most likely for the court to take. But again, the odds are really against you. But man, they've got bells and whistles and red flags running all over the place when they look at that one, when they see all the outside briefs that have been filed.
And I would think that the previous big victory for First Liberty, or one of them, the Coach Kennedy case, would this have an effect? Does that change things now that case has been decided?
It absolutely does. Kennedy sets the stage because of the doing away with this horrible test called the Lemon test that misconstrued the Establishment Clause, because that's the argument. Oh, this is a public place; it must violate the Establishment Clause, and Kennedy makes that's just not true. And so I think what's interesting, I mean, Kelly talks about the 21 briefs. I mean, to me, the most significant brief is the Florida AG. So the Attorney General of Florida, right? And this is the Florida High School Association who's on the other side. The Florida AG has led a brief with 16 other state attorney generals saying, no, take this case. First Liberty is right. So that's amazing in itself. And he mentioned our Kennedy case had 11. Well, here's another case that I'm sure the listeners will recognize. The Dobbs case, the case that ultimately overturns Roe versus Wade, had, I think it's 8. Had 8 briefs at this stage. So this should get the attention of the Supreme Court. And if they do take it, this is a very big, huge case because, I mean, we've all now under this that you can't have schools pray before games and that this is the government speech. But if it's anybody, if it's a private citizen who's speaking, it's not the government, it's that private citizen. And if you allow the private citizen the freedom to say what they want to say, they certainly should be able to pray.
And this could affect another very famous case, the Santa Fe case, which was a case about whether you could have a prayer before the football game. That case really has some implications here. And so if the court were to take this, I think they would probably have to deal with that. And maybe, again, I think they would open up much more freedom for people to pray. Nobody should be ever forced to pray, but everybody should always be allowed to pray. And that's kind of the direction we're moving. So this could be a really important case for that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting something you said a minute ago, and just really thinking about the implications of this is not just hindering free speech, but saying your speech is not your own. And it's never just about the one issue that is in this particular case, right? It's something that can affect so many others. Absolutely.
That's why these Supreme Court cases are so big, because they affect so many things beyond. They create a principle that then applies in a lot of different contexts. So when they open up freedom, it's significant way beyond the facts of that case.
Yeah. So this is in Florida. There's another case that we'll talk about in a minute that's out of Florida. And then there's some good news out of Florida that we will get to here before too long. But really quickly, before we go to the break, this is a case that you have asked the Supreme Court to hear, which obviously it seems like there's a good chance that they might, considering how many people have filed amicus briefs. But I believe First Liberty already has a case that's been accepted for next term of the Supreme Court.
We do.
Yeah, we do. So it's a case out of Mississippi, and it's involving a man named Gabe Olivier. And again, these facts are just crazy. But quickly, the city passed an ordinance targeting Gabe that told him where he can and cannot preach in a public park. And Gabe wanted to preach near an amphitheater, so actually where there were people, and so that he could communicate with them. And the city passed an ordinance that says, no, Gabe, you have to do it in a corner of the park. And what's so outrageous, they not even do the ordinance, that what the case said basically was, even though Gabe violated the ordinance, which he did violate it, it's an unconstitutional ordinance, he couldn't have his day in court because he had pled guilty.
Wow. So many things happening. So glad that First Liberty is leading the fight to protect our first freedom. And so we will be back after this short break. But as a reminder, you can go to pointofview.net and follow along with the cases and the news items that we're discussing. And don't forget to check out firstliberty.org as well, so you can read more details about all the religious liberty cases we're discussing. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Jonathan Turley wrote a strongly worded warning about the rise of socialism in America. The George Washington law professor reminds us that during the Cold War, Soviet communists referred to American liberals as useful idiots. He observes the same mindset in what he calls a new generation of armchair revolutionaries. He says the New York mayoral candidate Zoran Mandani personifies this new movement. Part of the reason for the rise is the fact that these young people lack any memory of the failure of socialist and communist systems in the 20th century. Later in his article, he expands on this idea. He says young voters have no inkling of what life was like under socialist and communist governments. They were not alive when radical shifts to socialism in Great Britain and France destroyed their economies and had to be reversed. Mamdani has talked about seizing the means of production. He's also called for the seizure of unoccupied luxury condos in New York to turn over to the homeless. With pledges of state-run grocery stores and other proposals, many are thrilled by the prospect of Marxism coming to America. Now, radical professors on college campuses are another reason for the rise of socialism. One professor he cites calls for radicals to force the U.S. out of everywhere, including Turtle Island, which is the Native American name to describe North America. The goal is to dismantle the settler project that is the United States for the freedom and the future of all life on this planet. Another professor denounced the University of Chicago as an evil and colonialist institution, but still plans to remain at the college and was even made the director of graduate studies. Perhaps now you can see why he uses the phrase useful idiots to describe many in this emerging generation. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to the weekend edition. Let's stay in the state of Florida for a few moments and talk about an initial win, I believe, that you have won for a family in a neighborhood where they have been facing a lot of discrimination. And I know that First Liberty has a long history of supporting Jewish Americans who are trying to worship freely in their homes and in their communities. But this seems to have, kind of a different tone to it, at least in terms of some of the hate that this couple has received. Or maybe it's typical. I'm not sure. Y'all want to break that down?
Well, unfortunately, it's becoming more typical. The rise of cases that we're seeing involving Jewish congregations and members of the Jewish faith are rising. So we have more and more. And so this one is outrageous on a lot of levels. One, just that the proof is outrageous in that we actually have some of the hate in emails. I mean, saying things like, "I wish Hitler had completed the job."
Wow.
Think about that. What year is this? 2025, and we still have people, and that someone would think it.
Yeah.
Two, that you would say it, and then third, that you'd actually put it in an email. So this case it's a little unique in that it's not against a local government or a state government. It's against a homeowners association. And anybody, and I'd be careful because I live in one, so I don't want them coming after me. But
we love HOAs.
But we all know HOAs, and so this is an HOA. But the HOA in a lot of communities steps in and they act like the state, right? Mm-hmm. They're regulating like the state, and they can engage in discrimination, and that's what they're doing here. And so this is a case where we represent a Jewish couple who, among other things, wanted to establish a synagogue in their community. And the homeowners association, despite having churches in the community and other religious, just sat on it and wouldn't respond. And then really in an effort to really get them out of their community, they didn't like them, and which is just a horrible discrimination. to force these people out. So the homeowners association sought to dismiss the case. Of all things, they're in front of a judge that probably most of our listeners will recognize. It's Judge Cannon, of course, who had at least one of the Trump cases. And once again, she ruled in the right way and said that their attempts to dismiss the case were wrong and that we can proceed with our case. So just incredible that this is America today and that this exists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine you own a piece of land and you can build anything you want on the land except for one thing, a Jewish synagogue.
Yeah.
You can build a church. You can do anything. And you're like, well, maybe there's some explanation. No, the explanation was we don't want, quote, those kind of people in our neighborhood, followed by Hitler should have finished the job. So it's not much of a question as to why this happened. And you would think, I mean, this is what we thought, with all this evidence, that as soon as we send a letter and say, hey, let's get this rectified, that they would want to rectify it. Instead, they want to go to a lawsuit.
Wow.
And then when you file a lawsuit with all the evidence, with all the information, their response is, this should be dismissed. And, of course, the judge looks at it and goes, no. So it is really incredible that this is happening in the United States, much less in Florida, which there are a lot of Jewish people in Florida, right? But incredible, but it's an example of a lot of the Jewish synagogue cases we have, where there are people creating laws to try to get rid of people that have particular Jewish faith, for instance, Orthodox Jews. Mm-hmm. So they make it to where they can't travel to the synagogue, which they can't do by car in their faith. So they're just thinking of ways to create laws to get rid of these Jewish people from their community. We have cases all over the country. And so it's shocking enough that we have these, pastors who are being criminally prosecuted for basically being Jesus in numerous ways. We have all this criminalizing compassion kind of cases all around the country, but we also have Jewish synagogue cases around the country. So it's something that I think most Americans are surprised to find out about. Yeah,
definitely. So blatant. It seems like there's no shame. And when they were confronted with the fact that we have evidence, you would think that they would say, "Oh, oops, so sorry," but I guess not. So that case can continue. Let's talk about some good news from Florida, though, because despite the fact that you have people who make these mistakes and they do violate the First Amendment, Florida was recently named the top state for religious liberty protections, according to your Religious Liberty in the States Index. And Kelly, you were with Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida recently. So this is great news coming out of Florida, and Florida's leading the way, it seems like, in terms of their protections for religious liberty.
It was a great press conference, very well attended, lots of media. And I just think, this was an idea of our think tank 5 years ago to say, why don't we let's look at all the laws that people have in their states to protect religious freedom. And then once we have all those, we'll say, okay, what percentage of all these choices do these states have? And we'll just rank them. The more protections you have, the higher you'll rank on religious freedom. Now, we've tried, there's some laws that are really important and some that are less, so we've tried to make it fair in that way. Like a Religious Freedoms Restoration Act, for instance, is like a law that covers everything. And it's, that's different from one that maybe just covers your right to vote when maybe it's on a religious holiday and you provide other ways you accommodate. But it's totally objective. It's peer reviewed by academics that it's sent out. This is as professional a study as you can get without anybody putting their thumb on the scale. And it just lists all the states in order. And Florida had passed a number of laws in the last 3 years that allowed it to jump into first place. And what's great about this is, well, number one, every listener on Point of View right now can go religiouslibertiesinthestates.com. And I think there's probably a link at Point of View. I don't know. But it's easy to find. and you can look at your state and you can say, how am I doing? And it will show you the laws you have, and you can look at all the laws they don't have too. And so it's not like, this is some mystery, when the state next door has the law and you don't. I mean, you just click right there. You don't even have to go anywhere to look this stuff up. And so what's happening is people are calling their representative, which every point of view listener should do, and saying, why are we number 31? That's I think it's in Texas 31.
I'm looking at it right now, and I was surprised.
Why? It's because they haven't passed these laws. And you can really fall asleep on this if you're in a state where you feel like, hey, we're really pretty pro-religious freedom. Well, that's great, but do you have any laws that protect that? Because it might be that, 4 years from now, the people running your state aren't so friendly to religious liberty. And without those protections, you're going to be in trouble. And so there are some states that, as they were moving in that direction of becoming anti-religious liberty, more liberal and more secular and all that, they were smart enough to pass a bunch of laws, like Illinois. They passed a whole bunch of laws. And so they have some of the greater protections. Now, of course, now everybody's passing them because they're not passing any laws right now because they don't have that perspective. But I just encourage people, go to religiouslibertiesinthestates.com, look at your state, and then really push your representative, because we're watching a competition now, and the states are beginning to pass these. And this is an example of why Florida, which you can imagine Ron DeSantis was more than willing to talk about Florida coming into number one. And it's a great thing to create a competition on that more protections be passed around the country.
Oh, absolutely. So for religiouslibertyinthestates.com, I have the website up right now, and it's so fun. You can click on your state and it shows, what ranking you are. I was kind of surprised at some of the states with lower rankings. For instance, West Virginia's number
Very
50.
Bottom.
And I guess I expected California or something, even though it's down there. So definitely, and we want to encourage you as well to take action on this. So go to religiouslibertyinthestates.com, click on your state, look at the laws that you have protecting religious liberty, and that's definitely an action item. And so we'll try to link that at pointofview.net as well, but you can also find it, I'm sure, links to it at firstliberty.org. So when we come back, let's talk about another big victory that First Liberty had regarding the seal of confession for our friends in the Catholic faith. So we'll talk about that. Also, federal judges, how they're ruling. It's definitely, the Trump administration has been busy with lawsuits, so we'll look at how some of those are turning out right after this break.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Liberty McArtor.
Let's talk about another First Liberty victory that came down recently. Priests in Washington, the state of Washington, were really put between a rock and a hard place, according to my understanding, of either getting jailed and fined, potentially, or getting excommunicated from the Catholic Church. So tell us about this. This has to do with the seal of confession.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those really important cases, because if the government can tell a Catholic priest how they can conduct or not conduct something that's been, I mean, since in the Catholic faith, since really the start of the Catholic faith, that the idea of the confession that, you know, we all know, we've all watched movies, we all read books. I mean, what is more precious and held sacred as a priest talking to someone who's in the confessional? But I mean, and it's larger than that too, because yes, this case is about that. But if the state can invade that privilege, can it invade the privilege of when a pastor's talking to one of the members of a church? I mean, it's the same principle. Mm-hmm. So the state of Washington decided that they were not going to respect that, and that priests were going to be obligated to violate that sacred space and divulge what someone told them. And again, something that we're not just talking decades, we're talking centuries upon centuries that has been protected. And to me, it just shows one state's just complete disregarding the importance of religion and disregarding what really, you know, why so many people originally came to this country to have religious freedom. So fortunately, although we didn't get the best draw on a judge, we got, I think, a Biden appointee. And so we're a little worried about that. But the judge, our legal team, which is a wonderful, wonderful legal team, a lawyer in Washington, D.C., Matt Martins, who's with one of the largest firms in the world, Wilmer Hale, our volunteer counsel on that case, represents the Catholic diocese, the bishops there in the state of Washington, along with us and the Becket Fund, another religious liberty group. Together, we've come together to represent, because this is such an important issue, and did a great job of arguing the case. And so we were able to get an injunction stopping that law from taking effect. Yeah,
and I mean, you know, the effect would have been, if you say that, you know, their purpose was they thought they would get information on crimes. Mm-hmm. But if you really make it to where there's no protection, then nobody's going to confess anything. So you don't accomplish anything except destroy really what is sacrosanct within the Catholic Church. And it would have created a horrible precedent. But, I mean, Washington is a very liberal state. And this is just an example of the sort of secular left having just no concept of what they're doing. They're just so callous with regard to other people, because they think for them the ends always justifies the means. And I mean, this is as violative of, you know, the core of why this country was founded as anything. I mean, people came here because they were Quakers and Congregationalists and Baptists, and they just wanted to be left alone. They wanted to be able to have their faith and not be criminalized and not be told they have to support some church. This is the opposite of that. And so it is encouraging. I know the next story we're going to talk about, with so many judges seeming to rule based upon their political, label, which is horrible for judges. We shouldn't see that. This judge showed it doesn't matter. It was a Biden judge, but anybody with a brain who's a judge would know you can't do this. This violates the First Amendment.
Yeah, and that's encouraging. And I'm assuming, that this was specifically targeted at, at the Catholic Church,
yes,
at religious figures, because I doubt they're going after attorney-client privilege or any other secular comparison.
That was okay. That was okay. Attorneys are all protected.
Husband, wife. Husband, wife. I mean, there are a lot. I mean,
but not you religious people.
And the thing, it was just the common law has recognized. I mean, the English common law has recognized these privileges. I mean, greatly predate the American Republic. I mean, this is something that's been enshrined in English common law. But apparently, the folks in the state of Washington don't know about legal precedents and certainly don't respect the church.
And just to note, which you note this in your press release as well, the Catholic Church has its own standards that they have implemented in terms of reporting crime. And it's a very narrow situation in that confessional where it's, that confidentiality is protected. Is this a safe victory in terms of is this kind of the end of that case, or is this something that could pop up again?
Well,
it could.
Yeah.
It could.
I mean, we think in light of the judge being a Biden appointee, seeing it. I mean, we are right in this case, but of course we've had right cases that take 9 years or 11 years or whatever, and eventually the Supreme Court on a third time up will say that we're right. But we are right, but we are in the state of Washington, which means an appeal would go to the Ninth Circuit. Ninth Circuit is the most reverse circuit in the country. But even on this issue, one would think, and again, it just goes to you, but you had legislators in the state of Washington who by a majority, and actually a large majority, thought this was a good thing. And to me, that's just insane.
It seems like a lack of religious education on top of multiple other things. But we've been talking about judges, so let's go ahead and dive into that. And I'm sure our discussion will take us into the next segment as well. But this is an article from the Washington Times. You can find it at pointofview.net, where 75% of federal judges are ruling against Trump. And so I will let both of you take us through this. But in case somebody is skeptical or just wondering what does this mean, what do we make of the fact that judges from multiple different appointees tend to rule against Trump, but then you've got, I think it was 70% of Trump appointees ruling in favor of him? How do we understand what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to observe on this is, and this, I had a sense of this, but I didn't realize the numbers were this great. There have been over 500 lawsuits filed against the Trump administration.
For a day, right?
For a day. I mean, I just...
This is unprecedented, I'm assuming.
It's beyond unprecedented. I mean, it's just, when I was at the Texas AG's office, we would sue the Obama administration. And we thought, we had like 21 lawsuits, and we thought that was a lot. But this is incredible. There's nothing that he can do, that President Trump can do, that will not be challenged in court. So I think that's the first that this is. This is a society we live in today, that when a president acts in any way, his authority is going to be challenged. So that I think is, and then the fact that the administration has been ruled against in 75% of those cases, at least initially. Now, let's also point out that in many cases that it's gone to appellate court, and the appellate court has fixed when a district court judge has exceeded his or her authority. So you've got the appellate court, and of course the Supreme Court has stepped in many times as well. So the end result is not 75% losses and 500 lawsuits, because many of those have been fixed. But it is interesting that this is something Kelly just mentioned a little bit ago, that you can certainly look at who the judge is, who the judge has been appointed by, and that will determine the outcome. That's not how the American judicial system should work. Yep. And I think in so many cases they just see, Trump's on the other side, I'm going to rule against him. And that is not the way it should be.
Yeah. There's a lot of, we probably don't have time before the break. There's a lot of things in this, right? Part of the reason for this is Trump made a commitment. And the American people, I think it's without question, probably the number one reason they voted him in is to control the border. And many of these are about the border. And then add that then Trump is doing things to try to follow through on what he did that are aggressive. Because he's really, there are at least 10 million people that poured through the border illegally in the last 4 years under the last administration. And so he's doing things really strong. And then you counter that with these judges that seem to be very partisan and issuing injunctions to try to stop him. And so you've got both of those things, him trying to be aggressive and then them that going, oh, well, this is Trump, I think I'll be aggressive. Many of them are being overruled. And I think overall, we could talk about this when we get back, I think the left is making some really big mistakes here on where the law is going to move as a result of all this long term. It'll be a way they will not like, and I think they're not thinking through their strategy.
Yeah, so many issues to discuss with Constitution, courts, Trump administration, more right after we get back.
Early in her tenure as U.S. Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon began working herself out of a job. Last week, she got a boost from the Supreme Court. The Wall Street Journal's headline was High Court Paves the Way to Weaken Education Department. The court lifted a lower court ruling that blocked staff layoffs at the department, as well as President Trump's March executive order significantly cutting the education bureaucracy. The court's use of the term weaken sounds like a criticism, but that's exactly the plan. The Education Secretary told Fox News that this lifts the handcuffs off what we have been trying to do, which is really to get education back to the states where the president believes it does belong. But the feds can only do so much. To eliminate the department altogether would require an act of Congress. Clearly, the nation's schools need improvement. In math, K-12 students lag behind their peers in other industrialized countries. And between 2019 and 2023, reading scores fell 18 points for fourth graders and 27 points for eighth graders. And yet, as Nicole Russell points out in USA Today, many parents say their children have been indoctrinated with a liberal political bias. She highlights the partisanship of teachers' unions. This year's National Education Association convention just wrapped up in Portland, Oregon. In a speech on the 4th of July, the NEA's 2025 Teacher of the Year, Ashley Crossan, declared her job to be deeply political. In a column for Fox News, Corey DeAngelis, a tireless advocate for school choice, says this year's NEA convention laid bare its transformation into a brazenly political organization. Agenda items included defending illegal immigrants and birthright citizenship, pushing radical gender ideology, and passing a resolution opposing President Trump's supposed authoritarianism and violations of human rights. Mr. DeAngelis says the NEA refuses to prioritize student learning. It's no wonder parents are voting with their feet. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Let's keep talking about this article from the Washington Times. 75% of federal judges rule against Trump. So a couple of questions come to mind for me. I know that, or it seems that the Trump administration is pushing the envelope in a way of bringing up a lot of constitutional questions maybe that the courts haven't had to address or haven't had to address in a while. And then it also seems that you have some district court judges that are pushing the bounds of their authority and kind of playing with that. How much can they really control what's happening outside of their district? So I'm curious to see, is that a correct assessment of kind of what's happening here with all these cases?
Yeah, I think the Trump administration is certainly pushing the envelope. But as Kelly mentioned in the last segment, a lot of these cases do relate to immigration. And you have the president taking actions in a lot of these situations to really enforce the immigration laws, which is kind of interesting because during the Biden administration and prior to that, the Obama administration, liberals and Democrats were applauding the President Obama and Biden when they were doing things like opening the borders, saying, oh, no, he has the authority to do that. Now you've got President Trump who's taking actions, again, on the same issue, immigration, but on the other side, he's saying, we need to take actions that actually close the borders. Yeah. So they're kind of having it, they're kind of now on the other side. And then you have these Biden appointed judges who in large numbers are ruling against the president. The other thing that's occurring is, and again, when Biden was president, the liberals would criticize those challenging Biden Obama's actions. Hey, you guys pick places where you're doing judicial selection, and that's somehow unfairly where you're going to bring a lawsuit. Well, if you look at these 500 lawsuits and the percentages break down, I mean, most of them are they're going to judges who they believe are going to rule favorably. Mm-hmm. So they're suing in places like D.C. and Massachusetts and California, where they're overwhelming numbers. So I think those two things are at play.
Yeah, and there's a lot of these decisions against Trump come from 4 or 5 judges. Yeah. So, it looks skewed that way. But I do think strategically they're making a lot of mistakes because there are a lot of things that have really the liberals have really enjoyed having. Things like, Trump can't fire any of these people in the executive branch that are on these commissions or these because we've created this doctrine in the past on the Supreme Court that really they're kind of a little bit of a legislative function in addition to executive, and therefore it's not totally under the executive branch. There's a famous case that says that. Well, most people have begun to say, what? If they're in the executive branch, the executive, you look in Article 2, read the Constitution, says that all power in the executive is vested with the President of the United States. And so he can hire and fire whoever he wants in the executive branch. So they really didn't want to tee this up because we've got people on the court like Justice Kavanaugh, who's not seen as a right-wing flamethrower. Mm-hmm. But you know what? He's very clear about the executive branch, what it means. He was in the executive branch under President Bush. I think that's likely not to come out very well. So add that to all the civil service reform laws. So we've got these laws that tell the president he can't fire these people. And this is true in the Justice Department. It's true in all these different areas because they have all these civil service protections. Again, how does that mesh up with what the Constitution says about who has the authority? Mm-hmm. And so we've all heard the stories of government people that they just can't get rid of because all these protections are there. So they have to build a record over 8 years, before they can. And nobody wants to do that. And they're changing administrations. Well, they're filing all these lawsuits. The unions and everybody's filing all these lawsuits on this stuff. Well, guess what? That's probably not going to go that well with them. And so what they're in the process of doing, if you watch it, what the Supreme Court's ruling and some of these courts as it goes up the chain, is I think these things are about to be, if not totally dismantled significantly, which will then not give the power of the unions to do what they're doing and all these other. So I think this is one of those things where you just want to get after your opponent. And sometimes it's not strategically smart to do that. And then you feel really good when the 5 judges on the district court rule in your favor. But all they're doing is setting this up as it goes on appeal for these huge overturning of precedents that are going to take away a lot of the things, whether you're the NEA, the National Education Association, or whether you're any of these other groups, these big unions that, you kind of counted on these protections where the government couldn't get rid of people.
But really getting back to how the Constitution was originally written.
Exactly.
And then it kind of comes down to when you're looking at these rulings and how different judges are responding, a lot of it's their judicial philosophy, right? They're originalist or something else, I guess. So this is, I think, if nothing else, showing the importance of those appointments.
Right. And I think the reason, that a lot of why there's so many lawsuits against the president is he's doing, on the one hand, something unexpected. He's doing something that no other president has done. On the other hand, he told us all that he was going to do these things, and it's like no one believed him. And he did win. He did win the election, and so he is following through. I mean, shockingly, you have someone who's actually following through on campaign promises. He said he was going to reduce government. He said he was going to tackle the border, and he's doing those things. And he's using, yes, I mean, in some of them, look, he's pushing the envelope. It's up against the line, But not in everyone. Not in every. I mean, again, every action he takes, they're suing him. And I know we're going to talk about education, I think, in the next hour. I mean, that's one again where this is what we expected him to do, and oh my word, he's actually doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been just over 6 months of his administration, and that I saw that headline come across a few days ago and thought, it's only been 6 months. It seems like so much has happened. So,
yes.
He is following through and bringing up a lot of, constitutional questions that other presidents, other leaders haven't brought up. So it's definitely important. It's important. I know that both of you at First Liberty make this point a lot. Elections matter because those people in those positions, the president appoints a lot of judges. And then, First Liberty, I'm glad that you've been able to at least help in terms of recommending constitutional judges and raising awareness about that so people understand the impact of that.
Yeah, and so far, I mean, there's just been excellent choices. I mean, really strong, additions to the court. These are lifetime appointments. So we do everything we can to make sure and give information so that good decisions are made, because you can't change these later. And this, one case affects one religious liberty case that we're working on. One judge is lots of cases. Hundreds of judges is a whole lot of cases. So it's really important that you get that right and you get judges who want to follow the law, which we see by the study that, is linked on Point of View and that you're talking about, that we shouldn't have judges going one way or the other based upon their politics.
Yeah.
They should follow the law.
Absolutely. Well, you can look at pointofview.net to see what we've talked about, what we're going to talk about. And as a reminder, that study is religiouslibertyinthestates.com. So if you're interested to see what protections your state has for religious freedom, definitely check out that website and look at the laws that your state has to protect religious liberty, and maybe call your representative and see if you can get even more protections there. But we're about to go to a break, and we have a lot of news to discuss when we get back, so don't go anywhere.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer. And that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View will continue after this.
wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Liberty McArtor.
Thanks for being with us on the weekend edition. I am in the studio today with Kelly Shackelford and Jeff Mateer of First Liberty Institute. And if you're just now getting a chance to join us, you can find everything we've been discussing today at pointofview.net. And you can also go back and watch the show if you missed any part of it at pointofview.net. And let me remind you that you can also go to Point of View Radio Talk Show on Apple Podcasts, because every day the show is uploaded so that you can listen to it anytime. So there are a lot of resources and ways to listen to the show. But let's jump into some news items. We know that there has been a lot of controversy with higher education, and we've had problems with really a lot of problems with higher education, but specifically after the October 7th attacks in 2023, Hamas attacking Israel. There were so many anti-Semitic protests at some of these major universities, and top among them, Columbia University. So this week, Columbia University reached a settlement agreement with the Trump administration of more of $221 million. So they're paying more than $200 million to the Trump administration, and it includes a $21 million settlement with the EEOC regarding the anti-Semitic discrimination. And so this is a huge settlement regarding the EEOC portion specifically. It's the largest religious discrimination harassment settlement in 60 years, and so the history of the EEOC. So this is groundbreaking, something that the Trump administration is very happy with. And so I think we'll see if this sets the stage for more victories for the Trump administration against higher education. But this is definitely big news.
It is. And I think it's important. Look, there are civil rights laws that are, they're on the books. They've been on the books. And they were just totally violated by like Columbia and some of these universities where literally Jewish students could not come to school. And they told them things like, well, just do it online or stay at home. It's like, no, why don't you make it to where Jewish students, they paid for their school. They have a right to come to school. You would never allow this on the base. If they said, if somebody was out there protesting, say, we're going to do something physical to any, black children, the idea that they would say, well, why don't y'all just stay at home?
Yeah, absolutely not.
No, that's not what they would do. But this is the Biden administration Justice Department did not do their job. So this is important because the laws are being enforced. People should have a right to walk into their classroom. And I do think it's important, too, because this stings, right? This is, there's way too much endowment money in these big universities. But $220 million is a lot of money. And that also sends a message to every other university that if you do this, and I'm not just talking about now, I'm talking about, 10 years from now, you're going to think, even if you think you have an administration that's very cozy to you, you have to know the next one might not be, and this will be the result if I do this type of thing. So I think it's important in stopping a lot of the nonsense that was going on. That was clearly a violation of the civil rights laws.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, So this is from Andrea Lucas, acting chair of the EEOC. And this is an interview with the Free Press on this topic, that the things the EEOC found in their investigation were things out of Nazi Germany. Again, students turned away from educational and work spaces, even Jewish faculty too scared to go to work. They were harassed. There was also a hostage situation during one of the protests where multiple Jewish faculty, staff, and students were actually held hostage for a time by these radical rioters, really. So they obviously will get to claim some of that settlement as well with the EEOC. But I think one of the questions, Jeff, is while this settlement is good news, how much is the culture on some of these campuses going to change? And that's the bigger question, I think, that kind of the undercurrent with all of this.
No, that's a great. The fact that this would occur after October 7th, now 2 years ago, and in some ways that does seem like just yesterday. Does this change the climate on campus? But the first is that the university does need to respect the rights of the Jewish students in particular, but also Christian students at these universities, because I think they've been disrespected. And look, the fact is, higher education in America is big business. I mean, I think that's what we've learned. I mean, first off, do you know how much money Columbia gets? The Columbia president said they get over $1 billion of federal funding per year. Wow. That's one university, Columbia, getting over $1 billion taxpayer. So there's got to be some responsibility. I mean, for years they just got the money, and there was there was no measurement of what, are you doing a good job? And it's only when we saw, looking at on the screens on TV, you saw this just hate on college campuses, and then you learn the stories about especially Jewish students being harassed, being prohibited to going to classes. So yeah, if you're going to get $1.3 billion a year, then you've got to live up to your responsibilities. I mean, I question whether or not, especially as Kelly mentioned, the large endowments that the Columbias and Harvards have. I mean, should they be getting $1.3 billion a year in federal handouts?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Especially when you look at, and I know that maybe I'm a little bit biased on this since I graduated from one of these colleges, but there are a growing number of colleges that don't take any federal money.
Patrick Henry didn't get $1.3 billion from the feds, did they? They got what did they get from the feds?
Zero.
Yes.
and would run away if the federal government tried to give us that. So, and you really are seeing, it's kind of a degree mill. Like you said, it's big business, and the quality of education isn't going up. There's so much indoctrination happening on these campuses, as we see from situations like this. And you have, I know that I can talk about the education issue a lot because it really bothers me. But, they've had big articles come out in The Atlantic about at these Ivy League colleges, you have incoming freshmen who have really never read a book before, and they're not being required to do that. And so,
and look at what the classes they're offering. I mean, it's crazy. Some of the classes and some of the majors that have nothing to do with real world.
Right. Yeah. Nothing. I'm not sure what they do have to do with it. So seems like word soup a lot of the time. So this external accountability is definitely positive. Just one of the things that the Trump administration is working on in terms of reforming education in our nation a little bit. So when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit more about that, including Penna Dexter's commentary, which is on the Department of Education and some changes that we are seeing. And so you can find that at pointofview.net, and that will air tomorrow. So more about education and other news of the week when we come back from this short break.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Jonathan Turley wrote a strongly worded warning about the rise of socialism in America. The George Washington law professor reminds us that during the Cold War, Soviet communists referred to American liberals as useful idiots. He observes the same mindset in what he calls a new generation of armchair revolutionaries. He says the New York mayoral candidate Zoran Mandani personifies this new movement. Part of the reason for the rise is the fact that these young people lack any memory of the failure of socialist and communist systems in the 20th century. Later in his article, he expands on this idea. He says young voters have no inkling of what life was like under socialist and communist governments. They were not alive when radical shifts to socialism in Great Britain and France destroyed their economies and had to be reversed. Mamdani has talked about seizing the means of production. He's also called for the seizure of unoccupied luxury condos in New York to turn over to the homeless. With pledges of state-run grocery stores and other proposals, many are thrilled by the prospect of Marxism coming to America. Now, radical professors on college campuses are another reason for the rise of socialism. One professor he cites calls for radicals to force the U.S. out of everywhere, including Turtle Island, which is the Native American name to describe North America. The goal is to dismantle the settler project that is the United States for the freedom and the future of all life on this planet. Another professor denounced the University of Chicago as an evil and colonialist institution, but still plans to remain at the college and was even made the director of graduate studies. Perhaps now you can see why he uses the phrase useful idiots to describe many in this emerging generation. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
So Columbia reached a settlement. Columbia University reached a settlement with the Trump administration, as we were just discussing, over $200 million that they're paying to the administration. So this addresses, at least for Columbia University, and hopefully will start to set a precedent for some other universities as well, to at least in not explicitly or so blatantly discriminate against certain classes of students. And we've been seeing this in higher ed too, in terms of their admissions policies, their hiring. And so the Trump administration has been tackling that. And so Penna's commentary this weekend is about the Department of Education, which is also addressing issues in the K through 12 level. So I know people have been concerned. What does it mean when you're going to pare back the Department of Education? So note, it can't be eliminated. That's something Congress would have to do, but it can be pared back. And I think the goal there is to really return a lot of the power to the states, which should be a positive thing, because each state, the more local control you have, the better, because you can address the local issues affecting the students in your state. And if we want to know if the federal Department of Education has been seeing good results in managing everything, I think the answer is pretty clearly no. But just as a reminder, so K through 12 students are lagging behind other industrialized countries in math. Between 2019 and 2023, reading scores fell 18 points for fourth graders and 27 points for eighth graders. And as we were just saying, there are many college students who are going into college and not able to read well in terms of, having a heavy reading load, having to take remedial high school level classes on writing papers and things like that. On top of all of that, we talking about unions again. A lot of these teachers' unions are really focused on partisan politics and political indoctrination. So, maybe it's a good thing if the state has more control over education. Maybe that would benefit our students better.
Oh, absolutely. If the founders, if we transported the founders today, I mean, they'd be amazed of a lot of things, but the education bureaucracy in this country would be one of the things that they just would shake their heads to, because it was never envisioned for the federal government to have a role in education. And this whole concept of having an agency that when I was in high school, you're probably in college, Kelly, but Ronald Reagan, that was a senator. He was going to eliminate the Department of Education, and obviously he did not succeed. And it's only grown, and its influence has only grown. And as you mentioned, Liberty, one of the reasons is the strong teacher unions, just incredible strength. And look, I'm sure, and we may have a listener, and this may cause us to get some phone calls. I'm sure they've done something good. I just don't know what it is, because I think it's not about the student. It's about preserving teachers and administrators, and it does not have the best interests of the students at heart. But the unions have made it very, very difficult. But Donald Trump, again, I mean, he didn't hide this. This is what he has said, and he's doing what he can do. And that's let's reduce the bureaucracy. I can't eliminate the department, but I can reduce the bureaucracy. And actually, this was one of the things. Actually, I think there were several lawsuits filed with regard to those actions. It had to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, as this article says, is going to allow the president to proceed with those reductions, because it's Article 2 power. So the Constitution gives him that power. So that's what he's doing. And so this is a first step. And my son's a high school algebra teacher in a large public school in the Metroplex, and he'd be the first one to say that the system is broken. It is not focused on students. Yeah. It's focused on administrators. It's focused on the teachers. It's focused on, unfortunately, so many woke policies that are coming from Washington, D.C., and it needs to get back. And I would say not just in the hands of the state. It needs to get back into local communities, because that was the original. It would be a local community who would hire the teachers in a school, and it was a local communities, and none of this nonsense coming from Washington, or we're sitting here in Texas. I would even say from Austin that it would be local communities.
Well, look, this all starts with kind of one major thing that I think anybody really knows if they look at it, which is monopolies don't work. They're not the way to do things. I mean, our whole country disagrees with that. We know that the free market is how you get better results, but our public school system is a monopoly. Yeah. And this is why there's such a push for school choice. I mean, many people call it the greatest civil rights issue of our times, especially for those who are poor, minorities, in the inner cities in these places, because there's already school choice. It's just for people who have money. If you have a lot of money, you can take your kids out and go do that. Right. So this is number one, the whole system is a problem because of the monopoly nature, and that really does need to be changed. The other problem, though, with this is that you mentioned, which is true. Last Democratic convention I looked at, it was either 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of every 4 delegates was from the teachers union. Wow. So it's all about teachers union instead of students. And you say, well, teachers love students. Yeah, we're not saying they don't, but all you got to do is look at what happened during COVID.
I was going to say the same thing.
What were the teachers looking? I mean, everybody knew this was harming kids. Okay, and since then we've seen all kinds of studies of how this really harmed kids. Behind. Yeah, and they're behind in education. They're suffering psychologically, depression, all these other things. But that wasn't the issue of the teachers union. It was, no, we don't want our teachers to go back to work. And so that showed you all you needed to show about what the unions are about. And that's kind of to be expected because their job is not the kids. Yeah. Their job is to protect them, the administrators and the teachers, and et cetera. And so you can't let that be the lead, right? I mean, that's not, certainly they're allowed to protect their interests, but if that's leading the whole parade, which it is, that's a major problem. Again, school choice puts the power in the hands of the parents. The parents know much better than even the most well-intentioned bureaucrat somewhere else what's best for their child. I think most of us that have children know that it might be different for every child, what's best for them. And so we need that power in the hands of the parents, not in the hands of some central planning group, in the state office or the federal office. And I'd point out with the Department of Education, the one thing that's housed in there that is necessary, but they're moving it, is the whole issue of civil rights in the states. Mm-hmm. So just like we were talking about with universities, the same. If you said in some state, well, in this state, we're not allowing these people to come to our schools, well, that would be a violation of federal law. And so, but that doesn't have to be housed in the, quote, Department of Education. That's moved to the Justice Department somewhere else. So otherwise, you don't want programs, policy, everything being led from Washington, D.C. for your school district.
Right. And I love teachers. Jeff, you mentioned your son is a teacher. I have very close friends who are teachers. Oftentimes, it seems that teachers' hands are tied to, getting these demands from somebody who's far removed from the classroom and the students, and that's prohibiting them from doing what is really best. So I will mention in the big, beautiful bill that passed earlier this month, there is a federal voucher program. So Kelly was pointing out over the break, states have to opt into it. But this is just, we always want to give some sort of call to action for you listening to Point of View. The more local communities are involved, the more stakes they have in making sure that their local schools are good. And so, run for your school board, go to your local city meetings and do things that do support the teachers in the classroom and the students that are in your public school classrooms. And encourage reading programs and things like that you can do to help kids in your local community, because those are actions we can take. And then definitely keeping an eye on all the changes coming down from the Department of Education that will hopefully continue to be positive. One of the fruits of an education that is heavily, indoctrinated with one political perspective is a population that unfortunately falls for propaganda very easily. And so that's what I want to talk about next. We're about to go to a break, but we know that the situation in Israel is complicated and it is so fraught with so much misinformation that people are buying easily. And so we want to look at some of the facts of that and address some of that misinformation so that you can really understand what's going on. And we'll do that right after this break.
In 19th century London, two towering historical figures did battle, not with guns and bombs, but words and ideas. London was home to Karl Marx, the father of communism, and legendary Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon. London was in many ways the center of the world, economically, militarily, and intellectually. Marx sought to destroy religion, the family, and everything the Bible supports. Spurgeon stood against him, warning of socialism's dangers. Spurgeon understood Christianity is not just religious truth, it is truth for all of life. Where do you find men with that kind of wisdom to stand against darkness today? Get the light you need on today's most pressing issues delivered to your inbox when you sign up for the Viewpoints commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Every weekday, in less than 2 minutes, you'll learn how to be a person of light to stand against darkness in our time. It's free, so visit pointofview.net/signup right now. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Liberty McArtor.
We're on the weekend edition, and let's discuss some headlines that you may have seen. I know yesterday, in my inbox at least, I was getting news alert after news alert, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, of the starvation threat and hunger in the Gaza Strip. And you see these photos of starving children, and it's just heartbreaking. And so understandably, people are concerned about this situation and the hunger that civilians are experiencing there. But I wanted to highlight this article. You can find it at pointofview.net. It's from Commentary Magazine by Seth Mandel that really digs into the root of the problem, because there is a root of the problem that is often ignored or downplayed in mainstream media, unfortunately. And that is that the reason that civilians are suffering is because of Hamas. And so I'll go through a couple of points. You can, again, follow along at pointofview.net, but there is a credible concern of hunger in Gaza. And so there have been many claims up till now in the last 2 years, but there really is a concern just because of the price of food. The price of bags of flour, for instance, are very volatile in a wartime situation. And so they're skyrocketing right now. I believe I saw some numbers saying that they are either at or projected to be at 50 times higher for the price of flour than before the war started, before the attack in 2023. And so obviously that's going to affect things. However, the caveat, Mandel writes, and it's a big one, is that there is enough food in Gaza. Nearly 1,000 UN aid trucks have passed through Israeli inspection points and sit in Gaza with their goods undistributed. And so there are reports, including from critics of Israel, from people who have been critical of Israel and the IDF, admitting that the IDF has offered the UN 5 different routes to distribute the aid, but they haven't accepted any of those offers. And so you have people who are starving. So there's more to the story. There's more to get into. But Jeff, Kelly, your reactions to the story?
Well, I guess we should expect Hamas to be involved in horrific activities, even against its own people. But we shouldn't. There's a co-conspirator here. It's the UN.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Liberty, I don't know if we've ever been on where Kirby's brought up the UN. UN is one of my other hot points. I mean, there is no reason for the United States to be supporting the UN. This is the type of stuff that they do. They're using these people to make a point, because the UN is as an organization is anti-Semitic. It has been since the day Israel was admitted. It continues to be, and they're, in this case, they're using these people. I mean, as you pointed out, I mean, there have been methods proposed to the UN. Here's how to get food to people, and the UN is not accepting those. And so the UN is using these poor people in Gaza as props, and they want to make an example, and they want to blame Israel on it, when in fact they're the perpetrators. And again, I expect that of Hamas. I do not expect that as from the UN. And look, Donald Trump has been courageous on a lot of issues. I mean, eliminating something. I mean, I'd like to see. Let's threaten the UN, because if the U.S. and get them out of New York, and let's stop subsidizing. I mean, we're the largest subsidizer of the UN, but this is the type of stuff they're engaged in, and it's not just in Israel; it's all over the world. They have their own political agenda, and which is 99.9% against the interests of the U.S.
It's a PR campaign.
It's a PR, yeah, and because they don't like Israel, and so let's make Israel the bad guy, and so we don't want to have food these people. Let's, one of the other articles that you've attached is the genocide article. Let's say this is Israel's engaged in a genocide. I mean, it's just baloney, and the UN is a co-conspirator with Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, the problem from day one in Palestine has been Hamas. I mean, even before the October 7th atrocities. And all these people, these, really, really foolish young people out there protesting and saying things they don't even know what they're talking about, they ought to be all required to watch the 45-minute video of what Hamas did. I have a feeling most of them, if not all, would not be doing those things again. But, there's a part of me that thinks what they ought to do is arm all the non-Hamas people in Palestine to take out Hamas, because they're stealing all their food. They're trying to kill all of them. I mean, they're lunatics. They're still holding the hostages. Why? but this is Hamas. This is what they do. A terrorist organization is an understatement for this group. I mean, again, in light of even what they did to women and children on October 7th, I mean, these are incredibly, incredibly evil people. And they're happy to starve their own citizens in order to try to, create a bad image thing for Israel by the media going along with them. And but there's enough food. It's just Hamas is stealing the food.
Right.
So I again, there's a part of me that wishes they'd just flood the place with weapons to the non-Hamas people so that they could take them out, because they're not outnumbered by Hamas.
Although Trump didn't he wants to make it a resort area or something?
Yeah.
Didn't he say let's just start off? But again, when you have an evil organization who's using its people, we've heard the stories. They put them out. They go hide in hospital. I mean, the terrorists hide in the hospitals.
Yeah.
And then attack. I mean, it's evil. I mean, it's evil. And the thing, again, I guess I expected of Hamas. I just don't expect it that the UN would participate.
And this is why I wanted to post these articles. So again, go to pointofview.net. There's this one, and then another one actually from Brett Stevens at the New York Times, because there is a generation, a group, and many other people in the United States and around the world who have been brainwashed by the propaganda. And even I just also want to note that I believe it's the Gaza Health Organization that puts out numbers of the people in the Gaza Strip that die during attacks. That's also being run by Hamas, and they don't discriminate between civilian deaths and active fighter deaths. And so even a lot of the numbers that we see in terms of the loss of life, while any loss of life of innocent civilians is tragic, it is misconstrued or put out of proportion. And again, as you mentioned, Jeff, Hamas wants that to happen, sadly. And so, yeah, they have an interest in keeping the civilians there starving. So as this article from Commentary magazine, and Hamas will hoard the aid and resell some for an astronomical markup. And so their strategy is to constantly keep the people of Gaza close to a hunger crisis, because it triggers the international pressure, which is already, the scales are tipped against Israel already, to let Hamas restock their goods, which then they hoard from the civilians. So this is how they refill their own coffers. And so that's what's going on. So definitely, pray for the people there, pray for the situation. The concern of hunger is real, but we won't be able to really get past this cycle if we're not recognizing the true enemy here, which again, we are. The international community, on the other hand, I'm not so sure. But another article to mention briefly is just from the New York Times. This is something else that you hear a lot, especially from younger people. So my generation, millennials, I hear it a lot from Gen Z, that Israel is committing genocide. And so this article that was in the New York Times by Brett Stevens goes through and gives many really solid points saying here's why they're not committing genocide. Genocide, defined by the UN, is intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethical, or racial religious group as such. Israel is not doing that. If they were, there would be a lot more people who have lost their lives. And so, again, it's a propaganda tool, and it's something that a lot of people are buying. And he just, I think, does a good job of bringing up other examples. For instance, in Ukraine, when there are attacks, they put their civilians underground. They want to protect them. That is not what Hamas does in Gaza. It hides while its people are attacked. And so we don't want to perpetuate something that's not true. Words and terms matter. And again, this is something that you may encounter with your kids and grandkids, something that they've heard in the media or, friends, even well-meaning people who are just, seeing these headlines that are horrifying and buying the propaganda. So I encourage you to go to pointofview.net and read these articles for yourself so they can be a resource that you can share to maybe enlighten, give a different perspective on the whole story. But we'll be back with more right after this.
Early in her tenure as U.S. Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon began working herself out of a job. Last week, she got a boost from the Supreme Court. The Wall Street Journal's headline was "High Court Paves the Way to Weaken Education Department." The court lifted a lower court ruling that blocked staff layoffs at the department, as well as President Trump's March executive order significantly cutting the education bureaucracy. The court's use of the term weaken sounds like a criticism, but that's exactly the plan. The Education Secretary told Fox News that this lifts the handcuffs off what we have been trying to do, which is really to get education back to the states where the president believes it does belong. But the feds can only do so much. To eliminate the department altogether would require an act of Congress. Clearly, the nation's schools need improvement. In math, K-12 students lag behind their peers in other industrialized countries. And between 2019 and 2023, reading scores fell 18 points for fourth graders and 27 points for eighth graders. And yet, as Nicole Russell points out in USA Today, many parents say their children have been indoctrinated with a liberal political bias. She highlights the partisanship of teachers' unions. This year's National Education Association convention just wrapped up in Portland, Oregon. In a speech on the 4th of July, the NEA's 2025 Teacher of the Year, Ashley Crossan, declared her job to be deeply political. In a column for Fox News, Corey DeAngelis, a tireless advocate for school choice, says this year's NEA convention laid bare its transformation into a brazenly political organization. Agenda items included defending illegal immigrants and birthright citizenship, pushing radical gender ideology, and passing a resolution opposing President Trump's supposed authoritarianism and violations of human rights. Mr. DeAngelis says the NEA refuses to prioritize student learning. It's no wonder parents are voting with their feet. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
A few minutes left in the show today. Thank you for being with us on the weekend edition. Kelly Shackelford and Jeff Mateer have been in studio with me, but let's talk about another issue. Earlier in the last hour when we were talking about all of the lawsuits against the Trump administration and the federal court battles, really, we mentioned that so many of them are around the immigration policies. But I think, in my opinion, there's a big scandal, a big tragedy that is not unreported but underreported. And in terms of what people are typically arguing about or fighting about over the immigration right now with ICE and deportations, what is really horrifying to me is the fact that there were so many unaccompanied minors that crossed the border under the Biden administration. And there were tens of thousands that were released into the United States to sponsors that maybe were related, maybe weren't. We know from previous investigations that vetting processes before these kids were released to sponsors were rushed through at at the behest of the head of Health and Human Services at the time, because people didn't want to see pictures of kids sitting in detention facilities. But there were gang members, there were traffickers, there were child abusers that were able to step up without any vetting and claim to be these children's sponsors. And now many are still unaccounted for. So just a few numbers. Over 11,000 children on average who were unaccompanied crossed the border every month under Biden. So their sponsor did not have to be a relative at all. Between the fiscal years 2019 and 2023, nearly 450,000 unaccompanied children were transferred from ICE to the Department of Health and Human Services, where that was responsible for placing them with a sponsor. And then many of them disappeared. So the Trump administration has been working on improving the process for tracking them down, and they've been able to locate 12,000 and arrested 400 sponsors. But obviously, this is something that we can't ignore because there are still so many unaccounted for.
I mean, human trafficking is a real problem. I mean, absolutely. And to see these shocking numbers, again, these are children who aren't with their parents, and they're coming across, well, who are they with, and for what purposes? So, I mean, I didn't, until you sent this article around, had no idea. I mean, you have a sense of a problem, but just the number. And you're right, during the Biden administration, they certainly didn't want to have them, again, we talked in the last segment about the photo ops. Mm-hmm. They didn't want the bad photo ops. So what do? Again, a bad result. Let these children just go. And who are they with and where are they? And we just know the large numbers of human trafficking that we have, for instance, in the state of Texas and California, and then people migrate up to the north to New York and Illinois as hotbeds of human trafficking. So these are scary. This is scary.
Yeah,
absolutely scary.
It is.
And I think that's the thing that's not focused on a lot. In the Biden administration, when they just completely opened the border, and I mean, maybe I'm naive somehow, but I still don't understand why they did this. But it's not just that all these people flooded over the border. There were people that wanted another chance. They wanted, an ability to get a job. It's that when they did that, they created a lot of just incredible suffering, evil, and death by not having control of the border and doing it in an orderly fashion. People think of the caravans coming up here and how people were abused on the way, coyotes were bringing people because they knew they could get them through. It was a huge percentage of the children that were sexually abused, even on the way here.
Yeah,
the trafficking of people, and the deaths just from fentanyl. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking in the hundreds of thousands of Americans. I mean, many people, pretty much all over the country, people who are dead now, typically younger people, but not necessarily. I mean, so the border situation is much bigger than people look at. I mean, if they could sort of see from the eyes of God what this did and how many people's lives were shattered or maybe taken, it's so much bigger. So while the current administration is trying to get a lot of the criminals and people out, I think what they've already done is so important in that the border is secure, mm-hmm. that people are coming through legal ways now, not illegal, because it stops the trafficking and, well, it's close to stop the trafficking and the fentanyl pouring in and all the things that so harm so many people in the United States.
Yes. I mean, there are always going to be evil people who take advantage of others and do evil things. But I think this, argument applies in so many ways. When you make it legal or decriminalized for somebody to do something, well, of course, you're going to see more of that. And that's what we had with the open borders. And even, so many people from other countries deceived, thinking that they would have an opportunity, or that they were able to make the journey safely, and as you mentioned, Kelly, taken advantage of by people who were really, trafficking them along the way, and encouraging them to make their journey under false pretenses. So just a few more numbers. In recent years, again, nearly 450,000 minors have entered the U.S. ICE failed to issue more than 233 notices to appear in immigration court because they were supposed to be checked on again and appear in immigration court after being released to their sponsor. And then you had over 43,000 migrant children who were given a notice to appear in immigration court and failed to do so, which again isn't surprising because the tragic truth is that so many are likely released to, or that investigations for the ones we have found, we know they were released to gang members, to traffickers. They're not in school. They're not with a loving family. They're not in foster care. They're, being forced labor or trafficked. So something to continue to pressure our officials and the Trump administration to stay on this and continue to find these children. And so, again, you can look at those numbers in that article for yourself at pointofview.net. Definitely something to be aware of and in prayer about. But we're almost out of time for the weekend edition today. We've covered a lot of news. And so, Kelly and Jeff, I'd like to give you both a moment to just remind people about any important cases to follow and resources. There are so many resources that First Liberty offers.
Yeah, there's as you say, there's so many cases so quickly, it's hard for people to keep up. We didn't even talk about the South Carolina case with our client who's actually being prosecuted for holding a sign on a sidewalk calling attention to Jesus.
Wow.
So I would encourage them, one of the things that everybody can do to keep up to date is go to, and you can go to pointofview.net and we're there, or just go to First, you spell it out, firstliberty.org, and get on the email. It's called Become an Insider. You'll see it if you scroll down the first page a little bit. And every Friday you'll get an email with 4 or 5 or 6 of the biggest articles on the issues that you would care about with religious freedom.
Great.
And we covet the prayers of the people. I mean, we know that all these courtroom battles are also spiritual battles. So we covet the prayers of faithful people.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for the work that both of you are doing to protect religious liberty. And thank you for listening to Point of View today. Thank you, Steve and Megan, for your work on the show. You can follow me at knowwhypodcast.com, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
It almost seems like we live in a different world from many people in positions of authority. They say men can be women and women men. People are prosecuted differently or not at all, depending on their politics. Criminals are more valued and rewarded than law-abiding citizens. It's so overwhelming, so demoralizing. You feel like giving up. But we can't. We shouldn't. We must not. As Winston Churchill said to Britain in the darkest days of World War II, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And that's what we say to you today. This is not a time to give in, but to step up and join Point of View in providing clarity in the chaos. We can't do it alone, but together, with God's help, we will overcome the darkness. Invest in biblical clarity today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.